Love is not merely an emotion among many. It is not one feeling in a menu of human experience to be chosen, measured, or compared. Love is who we are. It is the baseline of consciousness, the fundamental state that underlies every perception, thought, and interaction. Every sensation, every connection, every subtle awareness emerges from this core. All other emotions, including fear, anger, jealousy, joy, and sadness, are secondary. They are reflections, distortions, or reactions to the presence or absence of love. They are responses that arise when we experience love as blocked, threatened, or enhanced. Fear emerges when love feels distant or unsafe. Anger arises when love is obstructed or betrayed. Sadness surfaces when love is lost or obscured. Even joy, often celebrated as a primary emotion, is ultimately a reflection of alignment with love rather than a force independent of it. When you begin to consider this, the entire human experience transforms. Most humans live as though secondary emotions are the foundation of reality. They believe fear is a fact, anger is a truth, desire is the measure of meaning. They act and react as though these ripples, these temporary distortions of perception, define the world and dictate their existence. Decisions are made, relationships are navigated, and priorities are set based on fear, jealousy, or fleeting desire. Most never pause to recognize that beneath these ripples lies a constant current, a silent river of love that persists regardless of circumstance. Mistaking the ripples for the river, they live in reactive cycles, blind to the underlying truth of their own consciousness. Temporal subjection theory provides a framework for seeing through this illusion. It asserts that reality is fundamentally subjective, filtered through the mind of the observer. The patterns we perceive, the fears we feel, the separations and conflicts we encounter, are all processed within our perception. They are not fixed facts or universal truths. They are interpretations, narratives constructed by a brain that evolved to navigate survival, respond to stimuli, and negotiate social hierarchies. What we often accept as reality, what we believe dictates our emotions and our actions, is therefore shaped by perception, conditioning, and the habitual stories we tell ourselves about who we are and how the world works. Viewed through this lens, fear is no longer an ultimate truth. Anger is no longer an immutable force. Sadness is no longer a permanent state. Each is a signal, a notification about the alignment or disruption of love in that moment, not an independent authority over the choices we make or the lives we lead. Understanding this is liberating. It offers the possibility of disentangling secondary emotions from the core experience of being. It allows one to step back from the machinery of the mind, to see the layers of reaction and perception for what they are. Through this awareness, one can observe fear as an alert rather than a master, anger as a signal rather than a dictator, sadness as a messenger rather than a verdict. In recognizing love as the underlying constant, one is able to navigate life with clarity, choice, and conscious alignment rather than being swept along by reactive currents. Consciousism complements this understanding by directing attention toward the absolute, the foundational layer of consciousness beneath the transient patterns of the mind. Through its practice, love is not merely identified conceptually but experienced directly as the baseline of existence. Awareness aligns with this core, revealing life as arising from a foundation of love rather than as a sequence of obstacles, desires, or fears. Negative emotions do not vanish in this process. They continue to arise, because the human mind and the material world are imperfect and reactive. But their context shifts. Fear, anger, and grief are no longer masters. They are data. They inform, they guide, they provide insight into the state of connection and alignment, but they do not obscure the baseline truth of love. A person trained in this awareness can observe an emotion, understand its source, and respond intentionally rather than reflexively. Even in the midst of suffering, even when anger flares or grief overwhelms, the individual can remain anchored in the awareness that love is who they are, that love is the constant from which all experience emerges. This awareness transforms the human experience. It reframes how we interpret the world, how we respond to challenges, and how we relate to ourselves and others. It allows for the cultivation of patience, empathy, and resilience, because secondary emotions are no longer confused with the essence of being. They become information, signals, or reflections to be understood, not facts to be obeyed. To live with this understanding is to operate from love as the baseline, to recognize that the disturbances of fear, anger, and sadness are temporary shadows, and that the light of the self, the ever-present core of love, remains constant beneath them. Consider for a moment the way humans respond to threat. Most people instinctively react with fear, anger, defensiveness, or withdrawal. These reactions are immediate, often overwhelming, and they feel real because they arise from deeply ingrained survival mechanisms. They have served humans for millennia, keeping ancestors safe from predators, rival groups, or environmental dangers. Yet when seen through the lens of love as the baseline, these reactions are no longer the whole story. They are not ultimate truths or absolute commands. They are responses to perceived loss of connection, to the sense that the self is in danger, or to the impression that love, either for oneself or from others, is absent. Fear is a signal that connection feels threatened. Anger is a call to restore balance or assert boundaries. Defensive behavior is the body and mind's way of seeking safety, often without conscious understanding of what is truly at stake. If a person can identify the underlying need, the love that is obscured by fear, the connection hidden beneath anger, the longing beneath defensiveness, their response can be radically different. Instead of lashing out, withdrawing, or acting impulsively, they can pause, perceive the signal, and respond with clarity, creativity, and care. A parent confronted with a child's tantrum, for instance, might first feel frustration or anger. Those emotions are real, but they are secondary. Recognizing the child's need for attention, guidance, or reassurance allows the parent to respond from the baseline of love rather than reflexive irritation. A colleague criticized at work may initially feel fear, shame, or defensiveness. By tracing those emotions to a desire for respect, understanding, or connection, they can respond thoughtfully, preserving both dignity and relationship. In every moment, the same principle applies. Emotions provide information, not instruction. They reveal what is hidden, not what defines reality. Humans do not lack love. Every human carries it inherently, as an integral part of consciousness. The challenge is recognition. Most people must learn consciously to align with it, to disentangle from reactive states, and to remember the constant undercurrent beneath the turbulence of daily life. Temporal subjection theory and Consciousism act as accelerators in this process. They reveal that perceived separations, conflicts, and reactive patterns are constructs of perception. They provide a framework for understanding that what we often take as reality, the urgency of threat, the permanence of emotional pain, the primacy of scarcity, is shaped by interpretation and conditioning. By observing these constructs and consciously returning attention to the baseline, individuals can operate from the core of love, transforming perception and behavior. When this recognition occurs, life changes. Decisions become more aligned with purpose and integrity. Relationships deepen, fueled by clarity and empathy rather than misunderstanding. Perception shifts from scarcity, competition, and fear toward abundance, connection, and presence. Yet some humans resist this recognition. Some never consciously align with the inherent love within themselves. Why does this happen? There are multiple layers. It may be biological. Neural wiring in some individuals predisposes them toward heightened threat detection, vigilance, and rapid emotional reactivity. Brains that are sensitive to pattern recognition, danger cues, or negative stimuli will naturally perceive love as conditional, elusive, or secondary. It may be psychological. Early experiences, conditioning, societal pressures, and trauma can teach mistrust of love, associating vulnerability with harm, weakness, or rejection. It may be structural, as temporal subjection theory suggests. The very way reality is filtered through perception often obscures the baseline, reinforcing the illusion that separation, fear, and reactive emotions are primary. Individuals grow accustomed to living in a world where love is invisible or uncertain, and secondary emotions dominate their sense of self and environment. Even so, the recognition of love as core changes everything. It reframes the purpose of emotion. Fear is no longer a dictator imposing rules or restricting action. Anger is no longer a master demanding compliance or revenge. Jealousy becomes a signal, a notification of a need for connection, understanding, or integration, not a reason to destroy or withdraw. Sadness becomes a reflection of love temporarily obscured, not a verdict on one's worth or a permanent state of being. Joy, when experienced, is not merely pleasure. It becomes a recognition of alignment with the baseline, a signal that perception, action, and connection are flowing in harmony. Every emotional state, once seen through the lens of love, gains clarity, nuance, and function. Emotions inform rather than dominate. They reveal what requires attention, what connection is present or absent, and what patterns of thought or behavior might be adjusted. In this framework, no emotion is wasted or wrong, all have meaning, but none define the core of who we are. Love remains the constant, the underlying current from which every experience arises, offering a stable foundation even in the midst of turmoil. We can test this in daily life. Begin with observation. Notice when fear arises. Don't push it away, don't judge it, and don't try to eliminate it. Instead, ask yourself what aspect of love it is obscuring. What connection, what alignment, what sense of belonging or safety is temporarily hidden? Fear is not the enemy, it is a signal, a pointer to where love has been eclipsed, where the core state has been interrupted. Similarly, when anger surfaces, pause and reflect. Ask yourself what desire for connection, understanding, or justice it is attempting to defend. Recognize that anger is often a response to perceived harm to relationships, values, or integrity. Grief, too, can be approached in this way. See it not as a permanent burden, but as evidence of love lost or temporarily unseen, a reminder of connection that matters deeply. Practice observing without immediate reaction. Watch the mind's storytelling as it constructs narratives, justifications, and fears. Notice patterns that arise repeatedly, ruminations, assumptions, and judgments. Step back from identification with them. This is not detachment in the sense of indifference. It is alignment. It is the conscious choice to allow emotions to inform without commanding. Through this process, one gradually tunes into the baseline of love, recognizing it as ever-present beneath the turbulence of thought and feeling. This is not easy. The mind resists. Habit, conditioning, and the imperatives of survival instinct work against sustained awareness. Society resists. Culture, upbringing, and collective conditioning have trained most people to act as though secondary emotions, fear, anger, jealousy, envy, resentment, are the ultimate truth. We are rewarded for reacting, for competing, for asserting dominance or avoiding discomfort. In such a world, recognizing love as primary requires conscious courage, repeated practice, and intentional cultivation of awareness. Despite these obstacles, understanding love as core transforms how humans act, relate, and organize life. When one aligns with love, actions flow from clarity rather than reaction. Conversations change, conflicts resolve more smoothly, creativity emerges unblocked by defensive or self-protective thought patterns. Relationships deepen as the recognition of love informs empathy, patience, and authentic connection. Communities benefit when individuals anchor in this baseline. Patterns of fear, competition, and scarcity lose their grip. Social systems built on mistrust or domination begin to crumble, not by force, but by the subtle but unstoppable shift in collective consciousness. The world changes as consciousness shifts. This is not abstraction, wishful thinking, or philosophy. It is an observable principle grounded in the frameworks of temporal subjection theory and Consciousism. Awareness of the core state, recognition of love as fundamental, and alignment with it are actionable steps humans can take to navigate life more fully and consciously. Love is not situational. It is not conditional, contingent upon external validation, achievement, or approval. It is not something to be earned, won, or protected. It is who we are. It is the foundation from which all experience emerges. Recognizing this truth allows humans to live fully, to respond authentically, and to create rather than react. Life becomes less about managing secondary emotions as obstacles and more about understanding them, contextualizing them, and using them as instruments to deepen alignment with the core state. Fear becomes a compass, anger a teacher, grief a messenger, and joy a signal of harmony with the baseline. In every emotional experience, there is guidance, if we are willing to perceive it through the lens of love. In conclusion, love is the organizing principle of human consciousness. All other emotions are reflections, ripples, or secondary responses to the presence or absence of love. By learning to recognize it, by consciously aligning with it through the lens of temporal subjection theory and the practice of consciousism, humans can transform perception, thought, action, and society itself. The recognition of love as fundamental is not optional. It is essential. It is the pathway toward clarity, connection, creativity, and the full realization of what it means to be human. The journey begins with awareness, the intentional act of observing one's emotional landscape, noticing where love is obscured, and tracing the ripples back to the core. The journey continues through practice, sustained attention, conscious reflection, and repeated alignment with the baseline. The journey culminates in the living experience of love as the truth of who we are, constant, unchanging, and the foundation from which all human experience arises. To recognize and embody this is to participate fully in the evolution of consciousness itself, individually and collectively.